Hello and welcome to Field Notes. I don't like dissertation diaries, but I also don't like that. We're working on it. Okay, update for the week. I went to a dance class, success. I've been not good at writing my charming notes. And I've realized that I need to be a little more flexible with the 1,000 words a day rule or hour of revision, depending on what projects I have going on. So I have to do a group presentation on Tuesday. And so yesterday my word count was like an hour and a half of working on. An hour and a half, oh my God. It's like I only have to present for 7 minutes, but the prep work and slide creation and all of that takes more than an hour and a half. In any case, I mentioned in a previous video, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Well, I can't talk in a straight line, definitely can't think in a straight line. And it's a bit of a pharmacon in that it's both. Why can I not speak today? It is both a medicine and a poison. It's where my most creative thinking comes from, but it's also how I end up journaling questions when I have so many things to do and papers to do. But I'm really thinking that overall this is going to help me in the long run. I just organize my thoughts. Okay, so I want to talk about this and what led to this. And I'm going to do it. So when I started my master's degree was when I think I mentioned before, like I never cared about school. I wanted to be a musician. I didn't have a note-taking system. I didn't annotate my books. I did the bare minimum to get by. And that had consequences. As it does. I wouldn't say negative ones per se, but consequences nonetheless. And so when I decided to do graduate school, I realized I needed to know how to be an academic. And so I started researching learning, and I came across Zettelkasten, which is a note-taking system that basically exteriorizes your knowledge and makes kind of a mycelial network out of your own thoughts and communication with other people's thoughts and ideas. I can't remember the name of the person who made this famous, kind of created it, but he did it on paper and was like a very prolific thinker and writer. Anyways, if you Google Zettelkasten, you will immediately become quite overwhelmed. And so that was, 3-ish years ago or something like that. And I just didn't really do it. I dabbled with it. I downloaded Obsidian and I was just overwhelmed. But now that I'm starting this semester, I'm realizing that what PhD level work is creating these mycelial networks, and so I need to do the work to set up my Zettelkasten, which is going to be digital on Obsidian. So I went back to YouTube, Googled again. No, I didn't. I searched on YouTube Zettelkasten specifically for dissertations, and came up with a couple of good videos. If I remember, I'll link them below. The first was basically saying, like, you don't need to organize your system. You need to create links. And then it becomes self-organizing and kind of self-feeding. So that was very helpful because I tend to overthink things. And then the second video led to the board. So in the second video, I can't remember why she was talking about it, but why I felt it was relevant to me is that what makes a Zettelkasten a living system is the connections. If you have a note in your note-taking system that is disconnected from everything around it, it's basically dead. And I'm starting this Zettelkasten from scratch, so I don't have necessarily any connections yet. And so this video I was watching talked about Richard Feynman's 12 questions. Richard Feynman was a physicist and a Nobel laureate, and he basically said that, I watched one video on this, I'm trying to tell you what he said. I did a quick Google of it too, so I'm just gonna read what this dude said. Okay, so Richard Feynman's, this is just the little AI overview. Richard Feynman's 12 favorite problems isn't a fixed list, but a powerful learning method where you keep about a dozen important, interesting questions at the forefront of your mind. So you have a dominant list of a dozen problems or questions, a dormant list, sorry, not a dominant list, a dormant list of about a dozen problems or questions that fascinate you. Dormant meaning I'm not going around every day, all day trying to answer these questions, but they're questions, ongoing questions that I have. And then active testing, when you learn something new, see if it helps solve or illuminate any of your 12 questions. And that is so helpful when we are all consuming so much information, too much information, so much interesting information. I had to stop listening to podcasts. I tried to make the switch from books to podcasts at the gym, but like every podcast, I have like little ideas pinging, and then I don't go back to it, and then I just feel like I'm just, I don't know how I feel, but it's not pleasant. So I'm listening to music now. Where was I going with this? Oh my God, I should not be filming a video today. Okay, so basically it gives you an application for all of this new knowledge, and then I can say to myself, if I learn something new, I can say that's interesting and then let it go and free up some mental bandwidth. Or I can say, oh, that's interesting, and it answers this question that I have, and then I can take a note and put it into my Zettelkasten and connect it to other ideas. And then intuition filter. Use these problems as a filter for new information, identifying what's truly relevant and interesting to you. And I don't know that this is necessarily intuitive. I would pair that. It can be intuitive, most definitely, but I think we can also be a little strategic about it. I read a book over the summer, How to Read a Book. Yeah, but it was helpful, and it saved me reading a couple of books, which, you know, part of me is sad about that because some surprising things happen. But also where I am right now, I have to be a little more focused and dedicated. So coming up with questions, and if it doesn't fit these questions, then I let it go. And I would also say that the questions are dynamic, meaning that maybe I revisit the questions in like 3 months or something, and I'm like, oh, I haven't actually thought about this question in all of this time, where I haven't been engaging with any material that engages this question, but I have been engaging this other question. So it's not like a fixed thing, but it gives a little bit of organization. I was gonna try to use a mushroom metaphor, but substrate. I think that's what mushrooms grow on. It gives a substrate for the mycelial network to start to form. Okay. So that's why I'm doing this. even though seemingly I don't have time to do it, but I'm hoping that doing this now saves me time later. So this is hard to do, okay? I went back to some of my journals, I went to my bookshelf, I went to things I've been thinking about, writing about, thinking about what has my scholarship been over the last few years, and tried to find questions. And I already know that these are not static, like I'm gonna want to make changes to this, but I have one. I'm also kind of cheating. I have really 13 questions, but more than that because I like snuck extras. Break the rules. There are no rules. Okay, so I have a big question, and that's the one here. You can come a little closer. So this big question that I think I have in my work is, how do we craft a life that is itself an act of spiritual insurgency, where delight, beauty, and embodiment function as a political onto-epistemology? This has been something that I have always been intrigued about, and then you can kind of see some of my research in the past few years already coming in to influence this question, specifically Gloria Anzaldúa talking about spiritual activism. I absolutely love that. And this, I'm gonna say it, but it's like irking me, but maybe somebody listening will talk me out of my own destruction. So like delight, beauty, embodiment, yes, all of the things that you think I mean. But also, when I first brought up the idea of performing arts to my advisor back in October, the beginning of October, one of the things she brought up was clowning. And I have clown stigma. I really do. But I also know that there's so much so interesting about clowns. Like clowns and their ability to satirize politics and governments, the fool, the jester, people dressing up in funny costumes at protests. And it just, this idea, since she brought it up, keeps coming back at me, this idea of play as resistance. And then I just saw, I haven't listened to it yet, but I just saw pop up on my feed somewhere a podcast with Starhawk talking about tactical frivolity, specifically, I think, with clowning. Anyways, so as you can see it, and I think, I'm not gonna say that I'm doing this right based off of like a couple YouTube videos that I watched, but from my approach, the fact that I already have so much to say about this question is the point. The questions should be open-ended. The questions should be open to multiple interpretations and answers, because this is a foundation to build like a whole city on, or the foundation of an entire scholar's garden. So it's like, I think that's maybe why that term problem was interjected sometimes instead of question, because most problems have multiple solutions. Okay, let me flip this board around. Clown music, that's what that was. That was clown music. Okay. So my 12 questions, which may or may not change, and I did a little voice to text quickly, and I already realized like in a couple of them already seem like doubled, but that's okay. This is just a starting place. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna pause this and get my sparkling water. I have no idea why I'm feeling so breathless and excited today. There's genuinely no reason for it. Okay, let's see. Okay, the 12 questions inspired by Richard Feynman and that YouTuber who I'll put in the comments. What is, number one, what is the body when it is freed from trauma, the state, from patriarchy, and from the disciplinary gaze of academia? What is the body? What is the body when it's allowed to be a source of knowing? I've been asking this question since before I started officially studying embodiment in academia. What is the body? And I quickly realized like it's not so obvious as to say like this is my body. Sometimes, you know, depending on the context, sometimes this is my body. But I also know that my body extends energetically beyond me. There's the subtle body and the energetic body. So I think when I think of it, just this as the body, if I'm in a triggered state, that is particularly helpful to come back into myself. But in general, if I limit myself to this as the body, that's when all of these assumptions that we have been trained into us by systems and politics and things like that take precedence, and we begin to distrust the body, distrust energy, and things like that. Okay, number two. Oh, right here. Number two. How do I listen with the kind of depth and attentiveness that allows sensations and states to become theory and theory to become power? And then as I was writing this question, I realized in a lot of ways I was getting to Audre Lorde's erotic. So how do I embody the erotic? Yeah. And that one is similar, I realized when I was reading them back, to number 4. And I think number 4 might be a little closer to what I want to say, which is, how do I learn to trust in the quietest signals in myself that carry ancestral density, political consequence, and erotic charge? How do I let these signals shape and create knowledge? This voice to text was very awful. This is my interest in other ways of knowing, other ways of being human, reenchanting the world, reenchanting research. So I'm not quite sure that those are separate questions. Listening and trusting, and also feels similar to number 5. How do I reopen myself to the world, to subtleties like omens, synchronicities, and enchantment without handing that openness to institutions that would extract, sanitize, or instrumentalize it? So this is a similar question, but a little more political and a little bit more towards academia, a little bit more towards, I think, an ethics of production or an ethics of creation. How do I put safeguards in place? Can I put safeguards in place for the type of information that I want to put out into the world? And I think this is an important question. I was rereading Sylvia Federici's Caliban and the Witch, and I think it was in the foreword or the introduction. She said, and I don't know what time she was speaking from. Was it from the 70s she was saying this from, or from the 2000s? In either case, I don't know that it matters. She said that the body has become valorized and that this is necessary because of how it was basically ostracized and separated before. And I disagree with that, actually. That's actually another question. How do I listen to my body without romanticizing my body? Because I think you see all of these things online about these like crunchy moms to MAGA pipeline. And I think that complete valorization of the body has led to that, and it's also led to this de-intellectualization that we're seeing as well. The body, this irks me, okay. The body is not always right. Our mind gets stuck in loops and our bodies get stuck in loops. So your body might be reacting fearfully to something, and it doesn't mean that the thing in front of you is wrong. It means that the thing in front of you is reminding your body of something that was wrong in the past. So this valorization of the body, I disagree with it. And so yeah, like how, I don't know. Okay, maybe I should just read the, no, this is actually helpful because it's making me already start to clarify these questions by having to explain this. Okay, going back to number 3. What is the nature of pleasure when it becomes a way of being, knowing, doing in the world, a way of noticing, and a guide to being in right relation, rather than a commodity, band-aid, or distraction? This was my question for my thesis, my master's thesis. I'm not sure if it's still my question. I think it is. I think that pleasure is an easy doorway to embodiment, and embodiment is a doorway into enchantment. So I think, you know, this might be one of the ones that in 3 or 6 months I say, I haven't really touched this question, so maybe I can let it go. But for now, keeping it on the list. Okay, skipping forward to number 6. How do I write scholarship that is open to wonder, but also loyal to the lived body, and still sharp enough or rigorous enough to cut through the dead language of disembodied theory? I think a lot of people, myself included, have tended to think of academic writing as boring, utilitarian, ugly, and so it's like, how do I make academic writing beautiful? And I'm inspired by an essay that a friend of mine sent to me, why is academic writing so beautiful? So thinking about that. Also thinking again about Gloria Anzaldúa, the importance of writing, so important in fact that it should be discussed within our methodology sections. That's a big value of mine that I have. When I read papers that I've written correctly and academically and smartly, I'm like bored out of my mind. So this is like an ongoing process question. How do I write beautifully while conveying big ideas? Okay. Number 7. How do movements of the body become movements of consciousness, and what does that mean for a politic of liberation care and collective becoming? This is really a broadening of the performance art question, a broadening of what I was talking about last week, about how all of these thinkers talk about the importance of walking in their process, or thinking about yogis and how they do yoga to prepare for meditation, thinking about, and then also bringing in like what place does the body have in forming new knowledge? So there's a lot in that question. Number 8, how does pleasure alter what we believe is possible, and how does possibility enter the world through the body? Again, this is going back a lot to last year's research, the pleasure research, but I think it's also broadening to so many other things. So maybe I'll keep it. We'll see. Number 9, how do delight, whimsy, and frivolity become forces of insurgent transformation? How do they become an embodied strategy for loosening ourselves from rigid, depleting habits or systems? I guess a lot of that I already talked about in my big question. Yeah, I believe that pleasure is important. I did a whole master's thesis on it, so and a lot of that I'm pulling from Stacey K. Haynes' work, the idea that we should be moving towards what we want, not simply moving away from what we don't want. That brings in the idea that I was talking about a couple of videos before about leaving a void and then having less control about what gets put into that void. Okay. 10. What does it mean to live in the body as if it were Nepantla, where the daily act of adornment, the daily act of adornment, tending, movement, sensation, build a bridge between the human and sacred, between this world and the worlds waiting to be born? Lots of glorians will do it in that question. Nepantla is this kind of threshold space, this border space. Also a little bit of the Zapatistas in there. A world where all worlds fit. Maybe that's too big of a question. Maybe that's where my big question actually lives. I'm not sure, but really important to me that we include the body in that. Number 11, how do we live in ways that heal the fracture between longing for community and the isolating structures of modern life? And what kinds of shared rituals or pleasures or gestures or activities create actual kinship rather than this never-ending nostalgia for it? And community is important. Talking about loneliness is important to me. Bringing in some of Robert Putnam's ideas. He wrote the book, something about bowling. I can't remember it right now. Okay, I'm gonna try to let that go. But he talks about community and how being actually involved in community creates thriving democracy, thriving participatory democracies. And I didn't read his book, Bowling something, but there's a documentary on Netflix that I can't remember the name of, but I highly recommend it. Very interesting. Also appreciate a lot of conversations I've been seeing on social media that everyone wants a village, but no one wants to be a villager, or the inconvenience of community, or learning to deal with conflict. Lots going on there. Building a community of asking for favors rather than selling services. Yeah. And the final question, how does beauty fortify the spirit? And why does pleasure sharpen perception rather than dull it? Yeah, a little sneaky 2 questions in one. And I think this goes back to just a personal non-negotiable for me is beauty. And I've been trying, actually, even though it's a non-negotiable, I've been trying to negotiate it because it makes me feel like I'll be judged. But I think beauty can be nourishing to the spirit always, at all times. Like, I think regardless of most situations, being able to find like real physical beauty in the world with our senses is important. And then why does pleasure sharpen perception rather than dull it? This whole question is not actually really a question. This is me. The first part, how does beauty fortify the spirit, is like my own personal belief that it does. And I know that there are pieces out there on this already. And then why does pleasure sharpen perception rather than dull it? That's also kind of cheating That's something that came out of my master's thesis. It does open up our sense of perception. It does open us up to creativity. So putting this in here is kind of like a in question form, so that when I find those resources, I have a ready-made link to put them into. So, Zettelkasten, 12 questions. There's way more than 12 there. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing right now. So I wanted to do this now because the two papers, well, really one paper that I have coming up, my phenomenology paper, I want to talk about autoethnography. I want to talk about the erotic embodiment as a political imperative. I want to talk about phenomenology of perception, and then a bunch of other things into it. And there are things that I'm genuinely interested in and can see going into my dissertation regardless of what path that I take. And so I wanted to make sure, as I'm about to really do a deep dive into this reading work and writing work, that I can have a place to put these ideas so they don't disappear. And then the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders paper is a go. I don't know how much of that will end up in my dissertation. I'm rewatching the episodes, and just like, it's kind of mind-boggling. It's like so many of the critiques that I have, they just put forward like proudly. Like, I was talking about how one of the most famous moves, which is the jump splits, hurts their bodies. And like, you can't say that you're embodied when you're basically forced, if you want this job, to do this move that hurts your body. And I vaguely remembered that and being mad about it, and I went back and watched that episode, and they just like go on and on about it and talking about all the surgeries and the injuries and how it hurts them, but they have to do it because the fans want it and it's so impressive. What are you gonna do? Gotta give the market what it demands. I'm like, I think it's gonna be an easy paper to write. They are basically making my case for me. So yeah, I think this week is mostly gonna be reading, writing, trying to figure out the Zettelkasten thing, maybe probably tweaking these questions. Meeting with my advisor next Friday, maybe talking to another professor who does classes on pedagogy, which is related to ontologies and epistemologies, and then on other ways of being human, other ways of being kin, other ways of relating to the world beyond the Euro-patriarchal way that dominates. Talking to her about that. I emailed her, waiting to hear back. And what I am thinking I'm gonna do, because these videos are helpful to me, but I don't know how helpful they are to people watching, and strangely people are watching. I'm thinking about still recording these, but then trying to pull out, like, because this is me thinking in process. Welcome to my brain. This is me thinking. Okay, gotta stop laughing at my own jokes. This is me like finding the idea, finding what's present, finding what's going on. And so a few videos ago, I was able to turn that into a newsletter, which just went out yesterday or the day before, finally. Like, what if I did something similar on these? What if I use this space as a think tank, and then afterwards figure out like, okay, what am I actually trying to work on? And then actually make a helpful video from that. And then I'll probably put up both videos, but have the think tank video be unlisted for anyone who wants my thinking process, which is really just me. Anyways, okay. I'm gonna sit down. I think that some of this, I think this like worked out some of that anxious energy that I had going on, hopefully. You know, I drank a Coca-Cola before this. That's what it is. It was all that sugar and caffeine going through my veins. Oh my God. Okay. All right. Bye for now.